Hello, everyone. Somewhat of a change of pace for today. Uh, Resuming our narrative in the nature of order for tomorrow. Today, I've been going over something colleague and good friend of mine, Thomas, has been bringing up an idea, and he considers things very closely and carefully, and regarding several things. He works on a variety of things in his life, and several things in business and also design, bringing up the idea and how business and the business of design, bringing up the idea of play. And what does that mean to involve a sense of play in the way that you design, in the way that you build, in the way that business is done? And I think this works itself rather deeply into a culture, and I think it's especially important now. He's mentioning about how important it is now, and I tend to agree. And of course, the way this is, he doesn't mean play necessarily in the idea of a game or of sports, but of, as far as I can tell, I don't want to put words in his mouth about it, but as far as I can tell, in a kind of a kind of graciousness and of positivity and of creativity and generating something that's joyful. And in a certain sense, there's an ethical imperative to this, because it comes down to a question of how do we want to live our lives? How do we want other people's lives to be? And it comes down to a certain, you could call it courtesy or chivalry in terms of civility, in terms of how interactions are done. If someone, it's probably the opposite of being desperate. It's the opposite of being negatively adversarial. And so there are a number of implications for this with design. But first, taking a big step back to think about how the sense of play is actually kind of an opposite of something that we've been seeing a lot lately. We've been seeing this kind of accelerationist dialecticism. That's a big mouthful of words there, but accelerationist meaning that the contradictions, it's a phrase that, unfortunately, a lot of people are embracing that phrase of accelerationism in this country, when really it's something that Vladimir Lenin thought was a good idea and led to revolution and war in Russia. But there are a lot of people who describe themselves as libertarians, who somehow think that they feel very nihilistic about things and enjoy things being confrontational, because they somehow feel that something breaking is the only way for things to be solved. I don't think that that's true at all. So you have a sense of adversarial confrontation to solve things that and this ends up sucking up a lot of energy. I once had this was in Europe a while ago, in Prague. There was a big political meeting, and there was a guy that I believe was from Ukraine somewhere, who was a political scientist, and this was fall of 2000, the September of 2000 it was, and he was talking about how regarding global politics and finance, that if you push for the most extreme position, this is the most practical, because it pushes the other side to, and it's like having the big ask type thing. Well, this is a type of dialectics, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and if you push very, very hard for one side, the other side reacts and you get somewhere in the middle. Well, if you go around having confrontational dialectics like that, then you're creating struggle, you're creating conflict. And that's a very Marxist or Marxian way of seeing the world, is of constant struggle and struggle for the future. But number one, is that the way the world is? I'd say not always. And in fact, when the world is pleasant, and when the world is helping people, and when people enjoy things, it's not like that. So the idea of play takes the idea of adversary and would make it opponent, would make it competitor, would make it rival, would make it, or even teammate. There are such things. There's play that involves competition, and there's play that involves collaboration. Neither of which have a sense of emergency about it. When things truly are emergencies, it's important to treat them as such. But to go around saying never waste a crisis, like Rahm Emanuel, unfortunately, made famous, well, then if you go around looking for crises, or you have the moral hazard of even seeding a crisis in order to make an emergency, that's not a very ethically sound position. It's also not a very pleasant life. So I think this is a very important reorientation. And it reorients us to look forward with a sense of collaboration into the future. And also it raises the question of non-zero-sum game and zero-sum game. The best kind of innovation, capitalism when it's truly working, capitalism as such, working and making profits, is a non-zero-sum game. The idea is that you've added efficiency. For when someone wins in market competition, it's because you're delivering a more competitive solution because they have innovated something. They've produced it better, produced it cheaper, higher quality, with less cost, more efficiency, and so forth. And that occurs on large scales and small scales. And when you have people bringing their own business solutions and solving problems in that way, then, as people famously quote Kennedy as saying that the rising tide lifts all boats, that's the idea. There's no way around a business cycle, really, where you don't have constant onward and upward, because what goes up must come down. But you can generally have these downturns, not to use the crisis, but to have there be opportunity for a kind of restructuring into these positive solutions. And it's a real challenge, but a worthy one, to look upon that in the sense of creativity and of collaboration. And think about that. It was really challenging, something that Tom's mentioned to me about how does this sense of play get applied to markets. And that is a challenge, because oftentimes there's something that's going to appear like a non-zero-sum game with things like the stock market or options and indices and things like that, is that you have winners, you have losers. People make decisions that make them money. People have decisions that where they lose money, and it's not the market itself that's adding anything in there. But there are the forces, the externalities to the trade markets themselves, which the markets going up, which they have tended to do, comes from people bringing value to the assets, discovering new value, turning labor into new materials and so forth. So it's a real challenge then to look at the market situation, but it's a very important shift. Instead of saying, what's going to be just as a mental experiment, what would be more successful in a time of crisis in a business, is to take the attitude of, this is an emergency and we're going to start something new by being just ultra cutthroat, or okay, this is rough, but we're going to look for something positive, and we want to bring other people along in this positivity, even though things are a bit rough. Which attitude in business is more likely to be successful and lead to profits and lead to building a strong organization. I believe the second situation, the one where you're not trying to be ruthless and cutthroat, but the one where you're certainly you're not being naive either. You're being very aware and conscious, but you're looking at things and saying, okay, we want to go forward, find opportunities, create opportunities for other people, because then that creates this self-reinforcing system of solving problems in a welcoming way, because you want to welcome help in the business, you want to welcome the clients, welcome the customers, and I think especially when times get difficult, which they have been, and which there's going to be some difficulties ahead, I think that's very important. It's not at all clear in any given instance how you apply that attitude and that shift from the ruthlessness into the playfulness. But it is very important. It is a specific way of looking at positivity and a positive attitude. Now, in terms of design, it's very important in spaces where we work, spaces where we live, spaces where we work, have recreation, that life is more than just working and consuming. There is a give and take. There's a dialogue between the different parts of our lives. That the house is not, I even touched on this in The Nature of Order, that the house or the office building, it's not just simply an object that's separate from you. It's something with which you have a personal dialogue. You react to it, and it reacts to you. That the way you live in it, the choices that you make. So there is a kind of dialogue that may as well be positive and playful in that sense. And just try to think, if you want another thought experiment, just like the business situation, and think about how this shift in attitude changes how you feel and what you do. Think about a house like an industrial machine. You think about it in terms of its qualities of material. You think about how much it costs. You think about the capacity of the square footage, and you are going to store this much stuff here, and you're going to have this much floor space in the kitchen, and so forth. It just gets very dry. There doesn't seem to be much to go on. But then if you think about it as a place where there's an echoing sense of delightfulness, maybe is a nice way to think about it. And just imagine where it's a place where you open the door and you step through the door, and you're just so glad that things are the way they are. And you're so glad that everything fits for your life and the way that you feel about it. And also to know that it can accommodate change down the road, that it's not a rigid system. You can reconfigure one or two bits of it. There are ways to do that in houses, if you, for example, a good frame-based house is easier to reconfigure than a poured concrete house. There are definitely ways to do that. And it's one reason why these 3D printing houses are gonna have some trouble if they're just printing a whole wall like that. It's tough to reconfigure the interior of your house or to add on if you start a house that way. But anyways, and then also thinking about the playfulness of the dialogue with yourself, but also the playfulness of the house with its surroundings. How does it react to the light that comes through it? That's important, about the reflections and how it moves throughout the day. I appreciate that here. I comment on it sometimes about whether it's overcast or cloudy, and so the shadows will start. The sunlight will be pointing over there in the morning, and then throughout the day it moves out that way. And this is a south-facing window, so it gets a lot of direct light. And in the north side of the building, you'll get the very diffused light, and think of how it's turned. Now, if you're thinking all functionally, you're thinking, well, this is going to be the energy use, and we turn it like this, and it's going to save this much energy. Yeah, those things are important, but also think, for example, how are you framing the landscape and the trees that you look at? How are you dealing with the light and shadow? How the house is rotated. So I think that this is the sense of play, the sense of positivity is very important, especially with a time now where we're experiencing a big transition all times are a time of transition, but especially now, as we're seeing older models of the whole idea of where you live and where you work and commuting, and what type of job you commute for and what type of job you don't. I don't think we've had a big shift this big since the start of the Industrial Revolution. And it makes sense that we've had the computer revolution, and that technology has been around for a while, but now it's really kind of caught up that people realize how much it can impact their jobs, with a certain amount of people having the option of remote work. And then what does that do for the way that we live, for the way that we work and play in our lives? About how do you compose your workspace? That's a thought as to how you redesign homes in this new time of remote work. How do you reconceptualize office buildings and office spaces? So there's a lot to look forward to with this. So I hope everyone's been enjoying The Nature of Order. I've been appreciating revisiting it, and we're going to return to that tomorrow. I wanted to touch on this topic today, so I hope you found it interesting. I expect that as these thoughts and ideas develop, and I certainly expect that Thomas will be letting me know of ideas that he has on things that we may take forward. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment down there if you have any questions. Thanks for listening.